Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck with me, John Ferguson. This is your weekly rugby breakdown, and I'm bringing back in my friend from across the ditch, Jamie Wall. Jamie, it has been a difficult couple of days for Wallabies supporters. I can imagine the All Blacks are quite happy to retain the Bledisloe, also very much retain a good opportunity to be in the Rugby Championship. How are you feeling this time we're chatting compared to the last time we were chatting?
Yeah, it always feels better to be coming off a win, not just because I'm a New Zealander, but it sort of makes our jobs a little bit easier. Although it's not all smiles and sunshine. About half the All Blacks got injured during that game, so we've had word come in just in the last couple of hours that Beauden Barrett and Ethan de Groot have definitely been ruled out of this match. So I mean, you can figure out who's gonna replace them. But it is interesting that the All Blacks haven't brought in any cover at first five for either of them, because obviously Damien McKenzie will go to number 10. They have Ruben Love as well, who presumably will go on the bench. And there's also Geordie Barrett, who has started a test match at first five before. So like you kind of feel like the cover's there, but given how quickly Scott Robertson has been keen to get guys into this environment, and there has been quite a lot of talk about Josh Jacob, who's had a really good season, who's having a really good season with Taranaki at the moment, and sits behind Damien McKenzie. Yeah, the Chiefs was a little bit of a rumor that he might at least go over there to get put into the All Black environments, but clearly his time's going to have to come at another point. I feel like he'll be there at some point, but yeah, I think there's plenty of good stuff to take out of that. There's plenty of good stuff to take out for the Wallabies as well. So I think this week is going to be a really, really interesting test over in Perth.
We'll just go kind of with the All Blacks injury list first, and we'll touch there, and then we'll move on to kind of what this week is shaping up to be. Really innocuous injury, seemingly from Beauden Barrett there when he placed the ball down after a kick through from Harry Potter. I'm unsure whether you have more information on whether that injury actually occurred with that put down or whether it occurred earlier. But also Ethan de Groot copying friendly fire from Fabian Holland at the try line. I believe it was for Billy Pollard's maul try there when they tried to stop him. I could have got the timing on that wrong, but two injuries that actually had very little to do with the Wallabies. It's such a shame to lose two players, which I think, particularly Ethan de Groot, I mean, you've got cover, but Ethan de Groot really scrummed his way, I think, as you mentioned last week, back into really being heavily part of that All Blacks front row. And it is a shame to lose someone of his caliber and, of course, Bodie Barron as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a little bit more info on Beauden Barrett. Scott Robertson did confirm that it was an injury that he sort of picked up doing something else. I'm not 100% sure, and it was that bit on the trial and just sort of was that tipped him over the edge and was like, "Nah, I'm done with this."
Okay.
And it's kind of sadly ironic because it's the same injury that's kept his brother out of the starting lineup as well. So, but they're kind of hopeful that Scott will be back for this week. I'm sure Tate McDermott's really happy about that. And I think that you're right about De Groot. It's a big loss, and it's just a real shame for him because he's been playing so well. In saying that, I think that the cover that they have in the propping rotation is sufficient. So yeah, I mean it's more of a shame for Ethan himself, like given that the test season that he was having. So yeah, it's an interesting one going forward.
Yeah, and then we can go on and talk about that because you say that you feel that the New Zealanders have the cover there to be able to fill in for the likes of Ethan de Groot. I was actually surprised that the Wallabies didn't get more pay out of their scrum. Not saying that they should have won any penalties. More so, I thought based on what had happened in Wellington and Eden Park the weeks before, and based on how we scrummed against the South Africans and the Argentinians, I thought we actually would have been able to do a little bit better there. But the All Blacks really consolidated that and worked on that clearly in that 2 week hiatus between the tests, and they came out and did a really good job. And I'm just wondering whether who you see coming in is going to be able to hold that again, because I'm sure the Wallabies will be working this week as much as they got good pay at the line at the mall, particularly. But obviously they'd like to see a little bit more out of their own scrummaging prowess. Is that something that you think that, so who's going to come in there? Because I can imagine that you'd love to have someone like Offa Tu'ungafasi to be able to bring in, which I believe is currently, who is currently I believe is injured.
Yeah, that's right. Offers, I think he's pretty much out for the whole season
Yep.
with an, I think it's neck injury. But Tamati Williams will come into the starting lineup. In fact, we just had him on the media opportunity today for the All Blacks, so that's a pretty big hint that he'll be
Yeah.
involved this weekend. So yeah, that's just who they bring onto the bench. I mean, I don't think they're really losing much, and like you say about the scrum. It very much cancelled each other out on Saturday. It did kind of just feel like just a way for the game to restart. I can't recall any scrum penalties, and certainly none that were kind of affected the momentum of the game anyway.
Mm.
And you're right, like it's really interesting because the All Blacks set piece has been put under scrutiny in sort of different ways over the last three tests. And at Eden Park, it was the scrum. In Wellington, it was the line out, the ball coming in. And then on the weekend, it was the defence of the line out drive. And the Wallabies managed to gash them for two tries there.
Mm.
I very much count Angus Bell's try, even though it wasn't directly off the maul. It was a move that they'd worked out, and it was very much part of that set piece. So I mean, well done to the Wallabies for that. But it just seems like every week we learn something new that we kind of didn't want to know about the All Blacks set piece. And I sound like a broken record because I said it last time I talked to you, and I've said it to about three other people as well, that this has been the most dependable part of the All Blacks game. It was the one thing that was sort of reassured you that, okay, at least a scrum and at least a lineout's going to work. And they can, whatever else they're doing, like the foundations are there. Now it feels quite shaky.
Yeah.
But if they can take all the good stuff out of the last 3 weeks and just put it all together, then at least they'll be heading in the right direction, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much what you and I spoke about last week. It's whoever can flip the script of what they've been doing in the previous games and then be able to bring that forward. And that's what the All Blacks did, which was really interesting because they, like I mentioned prior to the game on the weekend, they'd only scored 3 points in the 40th to the 60th minute. Now that changed drastically. I think they actually got at least two penalties, so they more than tripled the amount of points that they'd scored in that time in one game throughout the last four. So it was very much the All Blacks. The Wallabies had a slow start again. They had to chase the game again, although I think they did better in the first half to be able to close that margin than they did necessarily in the second. So again, both teams were definitely attempted to grow and evolve. Is it interesting that you say about Tamati Williams being in the press conference? Pretty good indication of who's going to play. Will Skelton was in the press conference today with try scorer Billy Pollard. That's actually his first test try on the weekend. So what does that say to you guys? And what do you think? How do you think Scott Robertson and his team will be approaching a Will Skelton? Because it's been a while ago since Will Skelton's played the All Blacks.
Yeah, firstly, apologies to Billy Pollard. Got him confused with another front row try scorer. I'm sure Angus Bell won't mind too much. Sorry, Billy. Um, yeah, I think that yeah, as soon as the half it turned and it was 2017 at half time, I went back to our conversation. I was like, damn, like the All Blacks, I mean, at least based on numbers, are probably going to lose this game.
Mm.
But then, based on history, because they're playing at Eden Park, they weren't.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of interesting to see that script get flipped on its head a little
Mm.
bit. And in the old days, it would have been you know, like a 30-point All Black win, and there wouldn't be much to analyze afterwards because it would just be like, yeah, business as usual.
Yeah.
But because they managed to get themselves out of a jam and manufacture, the field position that they needed, because like obviously Roygaard's try was really important.
Yeah.
But
Very,
I
very so.
kind of got the feeling that much like during the French series for the All Blacks, that I wasn't particularly worried about the Wallabies, kicking a penalty to potentially win the game because I just didn't see them getting the ball anywhere near the All Blacks posts, and the Wallabies didn't have Reece Hodge out there who
Yeah.
could take a shot from 60 meters. So
or a Nick
I think
White.
that's the one thing. I think that's the one thing that the All Blacks have been quite consistent with this year. Obviously, like the
Mm,
South Africa game was the one in Wellington is sort of something else. But it felt very similar to the narrative of the Springbok Test at Eden Park. And so I think that going forward, what Scott Robertson should be most pleased about is that they're having this experience of being put under pressure and being able to push back and work their way out of stuff, because that sort of, at least from a New Zealand perspective, is what elevates the All Blacks above everyone else. Is that they're like, okay, yeah, we're down, but we know we can figure out a way of winning this game.
mm,
So yeah, I think that was the most pleasing aspect
mm,
of the win.
mm. Um, and just to take it back to Will Skelton again, how do you see that? How do you see Razor Robinson and the team navigating his inclusion?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't ask the question. But I feel like it's just a case of stopping him getting the ball in hand, because he's a big ball, and there's not much they can do against him on defense other than try and run away from him. But I think that given that he has played against the All Blacks before, and he's obviously a great player, and he's fantastic that he's back for the Wallabies. But he doesn't really have that kind of aura as someone who's like, oh gosh, they've got him back, like that's going to change
Mm,
everything. I could be completely wrong with that. I stand to be corrected. But I don't think they would base any sort of game plan around avoiding a guy like that. That would sort of go against the ethos of the way that the All Blacks operate. And even if they did, they would never admit it. And I think that you'll find out on Saturday night, because I think what they can do is tie him up in the set piece.
mm,
Make sure he's slow getting out of those breakdowns. But this is the sort of thing that they would do to anyone anyway.
yep.
And so I think, well, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm really excited to see him back and playing, especially after the impact that he had in the test that he has played this year.
Yeah, no, I think for the Wallabies, he's very much a player that can bring a little bit of aggression, and we didn't necessarily see. We saw that obviously in spades against the Lions. We didn't see it against them so much against the Springboks. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of mentality he brings into this contest now. It's going to be interesting to see how his inclusion, whether it's off the bench or straight in the starting side, creates more of how much of a change that creates for the rest of the pack, because going through the set piece, he would only augment and enhance our rolling maul. So that's a weapon that we can that his inclusion will absolutely have a direct impact on. He adds about another 20 kilos in the scrum, which will hopefully give our tight head props some more anchorage at the very least, and then some more weight behind them. But what's interesting is that we lose a line out option, and we saw the Wallabies get very creative throughout the British and Irish Lions series to be able to throw at the front, throw over the back. That was very much they did so with Rob Valentini as well. Then how Will Skelton is used also dictates how Rob Valentini is used, because I think that Tom Hooper is someone who was extremely impressive over the weekend in Auckland. He ran for the most meters of any forward. He carried the most times, and he made 14 out of 15 tackles. So he was very impressive. Harry Wilson had 15 out of 19 tackles, made 23 meters from his carries. I think he had about 11 or 12. And he got penalized the most with 3 penalties. And seeing as Joe Schmidt isn't making anyone a permanent captain, I've been talking about this for a while and just saying that if you're going to base things off form and you're not going to make Harry Wilson the captain, and you've got a player like Rob Valentini coming back from injury, and you've got a Will Skelton to be able to then fit in this pack, it all of a sudden becomes you've got too many puzzle pieces to try to fit into one pack. And you're not going to take Fraser McGrath away because he is one of our best players and most consistent, anyways. Um, it's that was a long rambling way to ask you, what's the back row that you would least like to see, or like the pack that you would least like to see against the All Blacks, because there are a huge bunch of factors in there.
Yeah, I think it's a really good problem for the Wallabies. But then again, I feel, at least when you're talking about loose forwards, that's been something that Australian rugby's always had plenty of, and so this is not new. I mean, you named the guys that I think the All Blacks are probably the most concerned about, which is Fraser McWright, who is absolutely world class and had a really good game on Saturday night, and Rob Valentini, who has proven that he can play his best rugby in these sort of games. So I mean, those two, and it's an interesting point you make about replacing Harry Wilson. I didn't think he had like a particularly bad game. I think some of his carries were really effective. Like he has absolutely no problem at all running at the likes of Fabian Ireland or Tubo Vai and just trying to put them on their ass. Like that is what he's there to do. And he did make a couple of those good runs. And like the numbers might not sort of suggest that he went for dozens of meters, but he put in a couple of really really good hits, and it was just a shame that it just couldn't be followed up on. So yeah, I think Tom Hooper was really good as well. That's again no surprise. These are all really really good players. So I think that any combination of those guys is going to present a real threat. But it is interesting what you say about the captaincy, because it feels like it's not tying him to selecting Harry Wilson for this weekend.
Yeah, I want people to keep watching this space really, because I do think that if I'm not for criticizing. I'm not for criticizing calling for a captaincy change if their captain is named. But Joe Schmidt has made a very clear point about not naming a clear captain. So everyone's fair game at that point, as the rest of the players are. James O'Connor had a howler of an evening with kicking balls out on the full or on by a kickoff and not kicking the ball out by a touch. But based on the fact that the Wallabies made 4 points for every 22 entry of the 6 that they had, and then the All Blacks had 9 entries and getting 3 points per average per entry. It just goes to show how critical those kicks into the 22 would have been for the Wallabies, and why he tried to choose so much off, because I'm sure that that's something they would have identified. Conversely, do you feel like, because the Wallabies scored via rolling maul, they made a couple of full line breaks in center field, and from their own half. How do you feel like the All Blacks kind of shaped on the weekend? Because for mine, the Caleb Clark's try in the first half, their first try, extremely clinical, good finishing, great running lines from everyone. And then the Leroy Carter one, where he just scooped over, that was just pure grit, and the Wallabies were scrambling. But it just felt that and of course the final try that they scored, which is very impressive, with Quintupaya, coursing through the middle there. But it did feel like the Wallabies were able to seed Meteridge on the sideline and then being able to come back at the All Blacks and to be able to frustrate them, although we copped a lot of penalties. Is there anything in there that All Blacks players can take away? Sorry, the All Blacks fans can take away from? Or is there anything you think that they need to be concerned about?
Well, I think that missed penalty to the line that you mentioned should really stick in the minds of the players, because I think they absolutely got away with one there, because had that ball gone out, they were looking at a line out, 7 or 8 meters out from their line, against a team whose line out drive was going really, really well. And that could have been the game right there, because the ball just got booted back down into the Wallaby half, and I don't think it came back after that. And that is testament to, the All Black. If you give the All Blacks an inch, they'll take a mile. But at the same time, go back, look at the penalty, look at what it was for. That sort of stuff needs to be fixed. I don't think the Wallabies will be making the same mistakes on the weekend. I'll be interested to see if O'Connor's retained for this one. But, those little things will just get drilled in all week. And missing touch from a penalty for an attacking line out when your forward pack's going the way, like, that's an absolute killer. And so I think that, again, it's nothing new. It's about discipline for the All Blacks around that 10-meter line when something like that could be really, really costly because, if it's the real business end of the game, then that's a shot at goal to potentially, change the result. So yeah, it was a whistle happy game, to be fair. It was 15-10, I think, in the All
Yeah,
and they did
yeah.
it did come out in the All Blacks' favour. But that needs to be addressed more than anything else.
Yeah, no, I think both sides would enjoy getting pinged a little bit less, and they will definitely need to be if they want to win on the weekend in Perth. I've written a piece this week for Rugby Pass that should come out in the next 24 hours. Why the Perth Test will be different, and I've outlined a lot of the reasons already here with you: selections, territory, also missing those crucial kicks. To wrap up the talk's been very topical, and I think it's what a lot of people will be looking at here in Australia, but also in New Zealand about because it wasn't like a blowout result. It was very much an 80-minute performance from both teams that needed to be in there for the contest. Just to wrap up, Jamie, are you expecting to see any changes? Because for me, looking at the All Blacks, obviously you'll see, as you've mentioned, De Groot go out and Beauden Barrett, but I wasn't entirely convinced by someone like Billy Proctor. And I thought Leroy Carter had an absolute great game on the wing, and I think he should stay there. And I think that's something that you mentioned last week. But are we seeing any other? Are we expected to see any other changes in and around the squad?
I think we could probably talk about a lot of changes, but I think it will only be the injury related ones simply because of the way Scott Robertson selected this team ever since he
Mm-hmm.
came in charge, that he very much errs on the side of caution. Yeah, I think that, yeah, the midfield is probably still the only one where you could sort of have a big question mark over. Um, I think Proctor probably had his best game in the All Black jersey so far. We're all expecting him to step and dance his way through the line and everything, but I think we should probably appreciate the work he did on defence there, because I don't think I mentioned Joseph Suaalii's name for that whole game,
Very
and
good point.
that needs to be taken into account. They shut him down really well, and it's not because he isn't a great player. It's because someone was on him, marking him really well. And it was kind of ironic that the guy who would most likely take Proctor's spot, Quinton Pai, ended up coming on the wing and having a very obviously good performance because he got a lot of ball in hand. And I mean,
Yeah.
that just shows the versatility of Quinton Pai. I mean, it throws up an interesting one because it's like he went so well on the wing and they
Mm-hmm.
need a winger this weekend. Do they just put him there?
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely right about Leroy Carter, and again I say, why didn't they pick him a lot earlier in the season? But that's done now. And I think the only other thing, and this is just my own personal sort of observation,
Okay, let's
is
hear it.
that Ardie Savea has played so much rugby so far this year. He played, I think, 15 games in Super Rugby Pacific. He's played every test, and he has started and finished most of those games, and he's
Mm.
been captain as well. And at this rate, I think he will stand to play if he stays fit, he's on course to play like 27 games
Yeah,
this
right.
year,
Yeah,
and like really heavy work minutes
yeah.
as well. If he gets named captain again this week, that will mean that he will be expected to be on the field for the whole time. But there
Mm.
has to be a point where they have to give this guy a bit of a rest. He's getting a 3 week break coming up, which is perfect for him. But the amount of rugby that he's played, I think that maybe we might see, he's not going to get dropped or anything, but just maybe just to sort of, if the game is in the sort of in the bag, taking him off and really injecting someone like Peter Lakai into the game, who I thought had a pretty good stint on the weekend, even though he wasn't actually on the park for that long, but maybe getting him to take some of that workload as well. So not so much a selection thing, just more of a game management sort of scenario.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned Scott Barrett might be back. Do you see that changing a Tupou Vi Fabian Holland combination, or because presumably he'd come straight back to the starting side and captain?
Yeah, it's probably more. It would probably more move Vi back to the blind side. I think. I
Okay,
don't
so
think
no
Tupou
Parker.
had one of it. Yeah, I would suggest probably
Okay.
Parker would either drop back to the bench, or they could
Mm.
maybe do something with Wallace Atiti, maybe move him to the bench as well and bring him on the second half. I personally don't think Tubabai had one of his better games on the weekend. He has made a habit of being a guy who's in there getting the penalties, and the calls just weren't going his way, and you could see him getting frustrated around that. So it's something to think about. But again, they're not going to have the same ref. Like,
Yep.
it's going to be a completely different guy. I'm not actually 100% sure who it is, but
Mm.
that will very much be taken into account. I don't see it. I'll put it this way: I don't see an All Black team without Tupovai running out in the starting team happening.
Mm. No, I mean he's a guy that fills a lot of Wallabies supporters with dread. I think he's been in excellent form, and for the Wallabies, I think they just need to have a look at their wingers because Corey Toole and Harry Potter were not at the peak of their powers on the weekend. And depending on what we want to do at the centres, Lenny Kitau and Hunter Paisami have played a lot of rugby together. So maybe a Joseph Akuso Suoli to the wing, it could be an option, but I don't see Schmidt making any drastic changes other than he needs to do. But Jamie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on again, chatting, giving us the Trans-Tasman and New Zealand viewpoint on the epic contest that was and what was going to be ahead at a sold-out Optus Stadium that sold out even before this one was played. So I am super excited that all the people in Perth are getting in behind the rugby. It is awesome to have sellout crowds on repeat in Australia and across the Tasman as well during the Rugby Championship and beyond. So, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the week of rugby ahead.
No, thanks very much, John. Great chat as always, mate.
And all you guys, please enjoy the rest of your rugby. I'll do a team review when it comes out on Thursday for both teams. And hopefully this time Argentina will not drag their heels and they'll put them out at a decent hour for all of us, as well as the South Africans, who may do a drop this afternoon. We're recording on a Wednesday, on a Monday afternoon, maybe a Tuesday drop. Who knows? But until then, enjoy your rugby and bye for now.